In Britain, there truly was an age with no king, no state, and no taxation. No landlords, no standing army, no rulers. This was not myth, and not a romantic fantasy. It was real history, roughly between 7000 BCE and 4000 BCE. At that time, Britain was not even an island. It was connected to the European mainland, and beneath today's North Sea lay a vast plain later called Doggerland. People could walk from what is now the Netherlands all the way to the east coast of England. This drowned landmass was roughly comparable to twice the area of modern England, with rivers, lakes, tidal marshes, and dunes. The island Britain we take for granted is, on a geological timescale, only a temporary state. Britain's isolation is a product of rising sea levels, not the beginning of its history. The English Channel separated Britain from Europe on a timescale of only about 8,000 years. When people treat across the sea as an eternal background, they are mistaking a very recent slice of geological change for the whole of history. Borders are not born, they are drawn later by rising water. In that world lived hunter-gatherers. They moved along forest edges, migrated between lakes and wetlands, followed deer herds, fished, and gathered nuts and berries. They had no cities, no palaces, and no symbols of kingship. But they were not chaotic, disorderly savages. Archaeologists found their traces at Star Carr in Yorkshire, carefully made antler headdresses. Skull masks cut and shaped from the frontal bone, with regular perforations and wear marks. Wooden fish spears and sharpened stakes. And repeatedly used wetland camp layers. The site has produced as many as 21 antler headdresses, the largest number from any single Mesolithic site in Europe. Wetland preservation is exceptionally rare. It preserved not only wood, but also birch tar adhesive and plant fibers, letting us glimpse an organic civilization of the Mesolithic, while most dry land sites have been reduced to stone alone. Excavations at Star Carr have continued from the 1940s to the present, and each return has brought new finds. Scholars often call it one of the most important prehistoric sites in Britain, yet public awareness of it is far lower than of Stonehenge. Those adhesives, fibers, wooden tools, wear traces, and thinned bone pieces pull prehistoric life back from an abstract Stone Age into daily routines and rituals we can actually imagine. The antler headdresses are especially striking. They were not simple decoration, but wearable structures made by cutting and refining deer scalp and frontal bone. Some specimens show perforations and binding traces, and their inner surfaces were deliberately thinned to reduce weight. That means the makers clearly understood they were meant to be worn in real use, not merely placed or hung up. Scholars suggest they may relate to shamanic transformation rites, symbolic communication between human and animal spirits, or hunting simulation and disguise. A person wearing an antler mask, dancing in a wetland, both hunter and priest, holding a fish spear and disappearing into morning mist. That image points to the core claim of the complex hunter-gatherers framework. A society without a state can still possess dense symbolic systems, spiritual structures, and serious aesthetic investment. The Star Carr headdresses have become one of the most persuasive material anchors for this argument, appearing repeatedly in textbooks and academic syntheses. In recent years, researchers have also applied organic chemical analysis to residues on the headdress surfaces, trying to confirm traces of plant dyes or animal fat treatments. Thinned interiors imply weight management. Wear marks imply long use. Perforations imply fastening methods. Birch tar implies composite material technology. Every detail says the same thing: these people were skilled, meticulous, and systematic. Their groups were small, usually mobile bands of about 20 to 50 people. Kinship held the organization together, and cooperation sustained survival. Burial evidence shows minimal differences in grave goods, with no clear status markers. No ostentatious power objects, no centralized stores of wealth. Human remains from Aveline's Hole in Somerset and from Cheddar Gorge suggest robust bodies, with injuries more consistent with repetitive labor than with systematic violence. Resources were mainly shared. Territory was not permanently owned, but used seasonally. Isotope studies show diverse diets combining marine and terrestrial resources, indicating strong ecological adaptability. No class is easily mistaken for no rules, but these data point in the opposite direction. When a group cannot rely on warehouses and fixed borders to maintain order, Order must be sustained by tighter social norms, reciprocity, and reputation-based punishment. The less central power there is, the more rules must be embedded into everyday behavior. Those rules may be invisible, but they are often stricter. Ancient DNA research has revealed something even deeper and more surprising. These people belonged to the genetic cluster known as Western hunter-gatherers, or WHG. They shared a post-Ice Age ancestry with related groups across Western Europe, with measurable genetic affinity to present-day Basque populations in northern Spain. This is not metaphor, but specific values in allele frequency space. They were not isolated tribes, but part of a wide network spanning Western Europe after the ice retreated. Yet the most intuition-shattering finding came from direct tests of genes linked to skin pigmentation and eye color. In 2018, the Natural History Museum in London, together with multiple research partners, sequenced the whole genome of a male skeleton found in Cheddar Gorge. This individual, known as Cheddar Man, dates to roughly between 7000 and 8000 BCE, broadly the same period as Star Carr. The genetic results were clear. His pigmentation-related variants point to dark or medium-dark skin tone, while he carried alleles strongly associated with blue or green irises. Technically, this conclusion rests on two sets of loci. Key genes influencing skin pigmentation include SLC45A2 and SLC24A5. The light skin variants common in today's Northern Europeans are largely absent in the Cheddar Man genome, indicating a darker skin type. Meanwhile, the HERC2 and OCA2 region, which strongly influences eye color, shows a combination of variants highly correlated with the blue eye phenotype. In other words, dark skin with blue eyes was not an anomaly. It was a normal genetic configuration for this population. This overturns the default mental model many people carry. The common assumption is that blue eyes belong with a northern cold climate and light skin. Genetics tells a different story. These traits have separate evolutionary histories. The blue eye variant may have emerged as early as 30,000 to 10,000 years ago, and could become common in some ancient groups independent of skin pigmentation. The widespread expansion of light skin in Europe is a later event and is closely linked to the spread of farming populations. The light allele at SLC24A5 rose explosively in frequency, matching the timeline of Neolithic agricultural expansion. Researchers argue that the dominance of this trait in Britain was a consequence of Neolithic migration replacing local hunter-gatherers. Eye color and skin color are not one system's accessory. They can combine freely. The typical look we see today is just the result of one phase of population history, not an eternal prototype. What does this imply? Light skin as a defining marker of Britons or Northern Europeans is, at the genetic level, a relatively recent expansion. The people who walked across Doggerland, lived at Star Carr, and danced in wetlands wearing antler masks likely had skin tones closer to those seen today in and south of southern Europe, while their eyes may have been blue or green. That combination is not very common in Europe today, but in Britain 10,000 years ago it may have been ordinary. Cheddar Man was not a one-off. Subsequent genetic tests of WHG samples from multiple European sites, including in Luxembourg, Spain, and Hungary, show similar pigment patterns, supporting the conclusion that dark skin with light eyes was typical for WHG rather than an exception. The Natural History Museum later commissioned a facial reconstruction of Cheddar Man, a man with dark brown skin, blue eyes, and black curly hair. The reconstruction triggered strong media reactions and also provoked denial and attacks from some far-right groups who refused to accept that the oldest Briton could have dark skin. Geneticists responded plainly, this is not interpretation. It is direct reading of genetic data using methods consistent with modern medical genetics. A reconstructed face can trigger political emotion. A set of genetic loci does not care about political emotion. Once the discussion is pulled from opinion back to data, it becomes clear the real fight is not about prehistoric Britain, but about modern identity narratives.
此音频由讯飞制作 AI 生成，